Welcome back. Today we're going to take a look at the new iFi Go Bar Kensei. So this is kind of, I would call it another flavor of the Go Bar. They've actually had a gold Go Bar, which was different than the original Go Bar. I had a chance to hear the original Go Bar, and I got this one kind of in the same program. iFi was nice enough to loan this one to me for a couple of weeks, so I have been enjoying it for a couple of weeks, and we're going to kind of talk about some of the differences between it. Not going to go back and review everything from scratch from the original Go Bar, because a lot of it is very similar to the original. There's just some new bits to the new one. So, and starting from the outside, right, it comes in this new wooden box, which is super fancy and kind of super impressive to feel. And actually, for those of you who are not used to buying iFi things, their typical packaging actually looks like this. So you would get a cardboard box, and there would be a very similar plastic insert that looks like this. But so to actually pull out the box and to get a full-blown wooden box was kind of a treat for me. So on the outside, this one is new Japanese steel. So it is very impressive, very weighty, just very premium feel to it. Super, super nice feeling dongle. I mean, even the original was actually quite nice too. This one is kind of a different level. So on the front, you kind of get lights for bit rates, and this is the biggest new bit of the Kensei version is this K2 HD button. This one still does MQA, still does XSpace, still does XSpace and XBase. It also does IE match, which is kind of right there. Volume buttons, mode buttons, and I think that might be it. So on the back, you do get the iFi and a new logo. So I won't put too many fingerprints on it. I will try to preserve its pristineness for a little bit. But here we can see at the top level, you can kind of see the new Go Bar. This is the older Go Bar, the original Go Bar. So at first glance on the original top level specs, pretty much the same. Where it starts to differentiate itself and the new things are kind of at the bottom in this box right here. So you can kind of see the original Go Bar had this standard low jitter, XSpace, turbo modes, IE match, and digital filters. You get the same feature set from the original Go Bar, but they've added in the Kensei version K2 HD processing, the engraved wooden box, which we looked at, ultra low jitter, which it's kind of hard. I didn't actually look at the jitter. I think the number is actually a little bit lower, so they call it ultra low. Let's go with that. And an enhanced power supply. So yes, and I think internally there was some new capacitors and a different reworking of the power supply, so that is slightly different. I'm not sure that's going to be noticeably audibly, but it is there, and that is something that changed from the original. So as I said, a lot of similarity to the original. A lot of things that I liked about the original still here. They didn't really remove anything. You just got some enhancements to what was already there. So what is it? I will say, as I just said, it inherits the best of Go Bar with a better build, Japanese stainless steel, and K2 HD processing is going to be the biggest new feature on this guy. And there are slight differences, like we just talked about in the power output. I think there's like a 2 dB different, or 2 milliwatt difference. I mean, the Go Bar was originally a super high power output device. This one I think bumped it up by just a little bit. Different jitter, different power supply, like I talked about. So what is it really? And I will say it's really just a better version of the Go Bar without losing anything and gaining a couple extras like the Japanese stainless steel build. And that goes for the Go Bar's top sound quality, which hasn't really all that changed, and a lot of the extra features which carried over, XSpace, IE match, all that stuff carried over, works the same. And it's been a while since I've heard Go Bar, so don't read too much into it's just like the original with some better things. Like, it's been a while since I've heard the Go Bar, but I would say kind of generally I didn't really hear anything that is actually lost along the way. I think this is only improvements on the original. So for tweakers, if you guys are into even with the original Go Bar, you have to play with the filters that they included. This is a very high quality playback device, and you can actually hear subtle differences in the filters that they provided. I tend to stick on Bit Perfect, sort of the no processing, and their special GTO. It's like Gibbs. I forgot what the T and the O stand for, but it was Gibbs something. So that's something that you don't find on many other devices. If it's on any other devices, I don't remember if that one's proprietary or not, but sort of a mid-centric, vocal-centric filter. And those two tended to work pretty well for me, and there is a noticeable difference to it. Minimum phase and the standard, sort of less used for me. So I tended to hover around either Bit Perfect because you want the original, or and I'm used to Bit Perfect on other players, or their GTO because you can't hear that one on too many other things. I think those are the two that I stuck around. But do play with those because even though there is new K2 HD, their existing filter set actually did some things to the sound that were actually beneficial, and it's well worth paying if you're spending all this money for this set to play with the filters that they gave you, because they spent a lot of time on them. So let's get into the meat of what is going on with this new K2 HD thing. And I will say it breaks down to these three features: upsampling, a more analog sound, and increased harmonics. So upsampling, I think, is the part of the marketing part, but it actually seems necessary for the process that they use for K2 HD. It uses 192 kilohertz at 24-bit. That is how it operates. So anything that is below that is going to be upsampled to that rate. Anything that is above that rate is actually going to be downsampled to that rate. So a necessary part of the process. So while marketing, they can say they are upsampling lower quality music to a higher bit rate, I think that's something that is, I don't know, not dicey, but it's really hard to pin your finger on an audio benefit of upsampling something that was at a lower bit rate up to that bit rate and say it actually sounds better on its own. I think it does something, and I would say that part was really a necessary part of the process. So does it sound more analog, more emotion? That was the gist of the main marketing message behind K2 HD, sort of putting a more analog, going back to what the original source recording sounded like, putting some of the things that were lost along the way to digital processing. That is the idea behind K2 HD. And they sort of boiled it down to those two things. And I'd say there's something to it, but keep in mind that it does depend on which filter you had selected. If you have one that is more detailed, that sort of contradicts what was going on with K2 HD. And when I think of analog, I think of that something that is a more organic, a more richness to sound rather than detailed presentation. So again, be aware of which filter you have selected. What is your set that's in your ears? Is that a more detailed presentation set, or is that something that is a little bit more on the analog sound? And do these additional harmonics contribute to the sense of more analog sound? And I think that is primarily what's going on. But on IEMs, I think it is less noticeable, or at least it's more dependent on which set is in your ears. Again, you have to kind of get in the mode of, I'm going to run this K2 HD processing. I'm going to use it all the time. How that interacts with the set in your ears, and how that tuning and how the two work together, how the filters. Yeah, it's a kind of an interesting thing to play around with and try to figure out at which point am I isolating what I'm hearing new on this Go Bar versus what's in my ears versus what filter is selected. Kind of a interesting balance for tweakers and audiophile types who are really into subtle differences. That's kind of where you're going to hear that. So the last bit of it, more harmonics and more overtones. Again, this is one of these things where if you're just a casual listener, I'm not sure you're going to pick up on more harmonics and more overtones. You really have to focus in on those bits, and you have to be pretty good at actually hearing them to hear what's going on with Go Bar. And I would guess this is most of what you hear. And I think if you read the marketing, you're expecting a warmer, richer textures and vocals, and that's not quite what's going on here. A lot of it is the harmonics and the overtones, and it's definitely further up range, kind of in the higher treble is where I most noticed it. And you just hear it differently, and it's not where you're expecting it to be. It's not necessarily within instruments and the textures. I would say it's more around. There's sort of an added clarity, overtones that may not have existed before tend to be something there. Yeah, really hard to isolate what you are hearing on the upper range. If you have headphones, I think it was very, very hard. If you have IEMs and you're very used to listening to air regions and upper treble regions, if you are into seeking out air or extended sources on your IEMs, I think this will be more noticeable to you. You'll know exactly where to listen to and how it hits your ear slightly differently with that processing turned on. It's probably going to be a very nice feature for those people who are really into that section of music or in that light listening style of upper range, upper treble. That's where it's most noticeably. If you're looking for more of a tube sound, a very warmer, richer style, more analog at the lower end, I wouldn't say it actually goes there. I think that was part of iFi's house sound. I think the Burr Brown, Smooth, I think all that was already there. And when you throw a filter on top of it, I think it was even more there. So I wouldn't say that K2 HD necessarily addressed that or increased that. I think it's more on the harmonics and the overtones is sort of where I more notice it, especially with IEMs. And just on that little bit on headphones versus IEMs, when I heard Go Bar the first time, I only used IEMs, and I was kind of just guessing when I got the Kensei version and used it with headphones. I think iFi uses more headphones for final tuning. It's almost transparent in the way that I wasn't expecting. It's very, very natural with headphones, whereas with IEMs, you can sort of, there's still some source coloring to it, but with the headphones, like the two are like hand in hand, paired perfectly. Very, very nice synergy between the Go Bar and headphones. I was kind of surprised. I'm kind of sad that I missed that on the original review of the Go Bar, but to hear it now with I had the Meze 109 Pros, I had the FIO FT3s, and yeah, both of them sound really, really great with Go Bar. I was super happy with the Mezes, the 109 Pros, the way they sound with the Kensei version. But if you're, as I said, if you're really into hearing the K2 HD, you're really into hearing high resolution, very resolving things in the harmonics and the overtones, I think I would start with IEMs because they do extension and resolution really well. Get used to hearing it there, and then switch over to your headphones and start to kind of figure out where you hear it there. The two didn't really match the way I think it was much easier to hear it resolved on an IEM than it was on either of those headphones. So that is what I got on the new Go Bar Kensei. So thank you guys again for tuning in, and I will see you next time.